Hey guys, so today I wanted to talk about the PSA Toronto Submission Center that just recently opened up. So I've been wanting to make this video for a long time, but I just haven't been finding the time lately to make these videos. However, I want to be back at it, and the first thing I wanted to talk about was the PSA Center that recently opened up in Toronto. So I got this email around mid-September that PSA was going to be opening a new center in Toronto soon. And then October 20th was the set launch date, and I wanted to make a video from September all the way till now, and that's how long it's been dragged on. But nevertheless, today I want to talk about the huge changes PSA has made now that they have a submission center in Toronto. So far, as I'm aware of, obviously they have one in the US, the most well-known one, and then I believe they have one in Tokyo, and I'm not sure if they have one anywhere else, except now they have one in Toronto for sure. And I haven't submitted with them yet, but I'm very keen to submit with them soon, and I want to talk about that later on. Especially if you guys see up there, I do have a submission I got back from the US PSA Center, and I want to talk about a lot of issues with submitting with PSA to the US as a Canadian, and then also the other impacts on other stakeholders this has, as well as the good thing it has for us, and overall just PSA, because I have a lot of thoughts on PSA. Some of you may know that already. So basically, PSA has opened a center in downtown Toronto but pretty much if you're anywhere in Canada, this is a huge thing, because first and foremost, one of the biggest challenges that was with submitting with PSA US is that you weren't physically allowed to submit from Canada. I would have to go inside the US to submit it, because they physically would block you from starting a submission, even not even like, because they didn't want to deal with the tariffs and all that situation right now. So they blocked creating submissions altogether, if you don't know. So basically, if you're a Canadian and had a PSA club membership, you're basically getting scammed, because they would not let you start any submission for the time being, they said, because of the tariffs. So you're paying 150 US a year, or whatever the price is, to not be able to submit. However, there was ways around it, but it's very tedious, it's more expensive, and now they finally have PSA Canada. This is great because you now have options to drop in your cards if they're super expensive cards and you're worried about, shipping across the border. You don't have to worry about the insurance, the shipping costs over there, all of that nonsense. If you're gonna ship like $100,000 worth of cards to grade to PSA, you could just drop it off, and you don't gotta worry about theft, any mishandling, damage during shipping, and all that insurance stuff, because we know things get lost from time to time. Then, in addition to that, I would assume, I haven't actually looked into it yet specifically. If anyone knows, they could probably comment on this, but I would assume the prices would be better, more favorable for us, because you wouldn't have to convert into US dollars if you're submitting from Canada. But again, not too sure how the payment processing is working with that yet, because I haven't submitted yet with PSA Canada, but I will be making a video on that soon, once we get through the submission I have already there, and then a bunch of other videos. But anyways, the next part I want to talk about in regards to this, which is why it's huge, is because there used to be, I believe it was a third-party company that was called PSA Canada. So the reason why I want to talk about this is because I'm pretty sure they're not actually owned by PSA. It was just like a really strong partnership or something. They might be owned by PSA, they might not be, but from my understanding is they're not actually connected. And again, someone can correct this if it's wrong, but either way the result is the same. So they used to charge a pretty hefty premium for you to submit it. So they were like based in Nova Scotia or something, and you would send them your cards from Canada, and then they would ship it to PSA, and they would handle all the problems. So the good thing for that was you would avoid any fees, tariffs, custom, whatever the fees were, you would avoid that. However, you would be paying a lot more, because on top of the conversion difference, so they would price it in Canadian dollars, but let's say the US dollar price was $12 on a special, you'd be paying $25 Canadian, which is more than double, which is not even worth it considering the currency exchange. It's just that they also had an added fee on top. So what I'm saying here is that if they were not an affiliated company, then basically PSA just killed that company, because the whole purpose for them was to middleman out the tariffs, the fees, the customs, the shipping, all those problems. But when it comes to shipping domestically, you don't really have a problem. Ship Canada Post, UPS, FedEx, anything is pretty much dirt cheap. I could ship a package like across the province for like $5. So it pretty much kills them, except for, you know, the odd person who wants to, like, you know, only submit, I guess, a card, and they like don't want to package, ship, whatever. But pretty much it's gonna kill most of the business, is what I'm thinking. So if one, they're directly owned by PSA, I would say it's a net positive for everyone, because, you know, Canadians get a cheaper price to submit, as well as PSA will have more potential people submitting because of that, because now it's easier for Canadians to submit. However, there probably is a loss in profit, because the Canadian Center, the PSA Canada affiliated entity, was charging far more for the submissions than the actual PSA company were to charge if you're submitting directly with them. And then that also brings the question for me, for like, you know, the GameStop deal, where like you could send it to Game. It was the same deal basically with GameStop. And so, like, what is the incentive now for you to go to GameStop and submit, unless you're only submitting one card, right? Because then you don't need to buy a membership. But for most people, it's worth it to get a membership. If you're just doing like a 50 card submission, it's worth it to get a membership, do your own shipping and handling. You don't gotta have any worries either. So I feel like they've just killed a lot of the partners and the related entities, even if they're not wholly owned by themselves. And I bring up GameStop and PSA Canada because they're just the biggest ones. But there's a lot of other middleman services that I would say are gonna take a pretty large hit because of this. So that's the main thing I want to talk about, other than celebrating the great news that PSA has opened a submission center in Toronto, because I always wondered, you know, out in North America, we have, you know, a lot of Pokemon stuff going on in the US, right? But Canada has always been involved with all this. Like, Pokemon Center first expanded to Canada, if I'm not wrong. Well, of course, other than Tokyo, because, you know, the history. But before expanding to the UK, they expanded to Canada, right, for Pokemon Center. And there's lots of distributors as well in Canada that get their supply from the Pokemon company printed in USA, and they import it over. So since we're so closely tied together, I was surprised that PSA didn't open a center here in Toronto, especially since they have one in Japan. But yeah, overall, it's going to be a lot more convenient for us Canadians, and I will be making likely a submission video for anyone looking to submit from Canada. So hopefully streamline the process, because I know it was quite confusing for me on the first time, and especially submitting to the US was extremely confusing. But the main takeaways from this video were that it's great news for us Canadians. We're gonna have lower prices to submit, less worries, because you can even walk it in and drop it off if you wanted to. And also, even if you're shipping it, the shipping distance will be a lot less. And then lastly, of course, that there's major impacts for PSA related entities that were doing middleman services. Really, let me know what you guys think about the partnerships they had, because I don't know if you guys have submitted through those people before, but it really does just, I would say, kill most of their business model, and they're putting a lot of their partners' businesses just out of business, in my opinion. But of course, they have to look out for themselves first, and I would see this as a net positive for the consumer, and it's great for PSA. It's likely great for PSA, because they're getting way more people submitting. But yeah, I wonder if they consider this, and what do you guys think is the impact for the middleman services? What's the future for them? And let me know if you guys are submitting to PSA Canada, if you guys are also located in Canada. Yeah, that's gonna be it for this video, and let me know what you guys think in the comments, and subscribe to join the journey.